No matter what RPG you pick up, getting off on the right foot is crucial. Thedas is a big place, and the Blight is no joke, but don't worry, we've got your back. My name is Kodiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and today we're helping you have the perfect start in Dragon Age: The Veilguard. Let's be clear from the start, Dragon Age: The Veilguard is not an overly complicated game. Quests are straightforward and clearly marked, lootables are everywhere, and the way you craft your character for combat is pretty wide open thanks to the flexible skill tree system. With that in mind, there are certainly things you can do to optimize your progression early to mid-game that will make the overall experience much smoother. Right out of the gate, you need to pick the class that's right for you. It's the first major decision that you'll make, and it's one you can't change, so you'll be stuck with it whatever choice you make for the rest of the game. As such, we'll give you a quick rundown of each class, but if you want to dive deep, check out our full-length video of what's the best class for your playstyle already released on the channel. The Warrior is a surprisingly fluid, up-in-your-face brawler. As a champion, you can focus on fire damage, AoE, and single-target burning, and buffing your ally damage while building up your defenses. As the Slayer, you instead lean into two-handed weapons, dealing rapid physical damage while amplifying your rage buildup and armor penetration. Finally, there's the Reaper specialization, which is all about necrotic damage. You'll leech life from your enemies and juice up your ranged shield toss skill, adding in higher damage, leeching spread, and applying necrotic to multiple enemies. The Mage, on the other hand, uses both a staff as well as an orb and dagger to weave blistering elemental attacks at the enemy. Leaning into a specialization, the Mage can go all in on either frost, necrotic, or lightning damage depending on your playstyle, comfort level being close or far from the action. The Evoker focuses on cold spells with its two branching paths, either enhancing your staff or your dagger, making them more powerful in almost any scenario. The Spellblade gives you more tools for dealing with enemies up close, while also tapping into electricity spells. Finally, there's the Deathcaller, which, as the name alludes to, puts the power of the undead in your hands, strengthening your necrosis spells. In terms of the Rogue, well, Duelist pushes the Rogue's melee capabilities to the next level, leaning heavily into stacking adrenaline, permanently debuffing enemy defenses, and controlling enemies with necrosis and stagger while amplifying your damage. The Veil Ranger turns your bow from a simple tool into a high-damage elite killer, tapping further into electricity damage, augmenting your charge shots with follow-up arrows and knockdown effects, and allowing you to instantly kill staggered enemies from a distance. Then there's the Saboteur, which dances between both ranged and melee combat to control enemies. Unlike the other two specializations, every active skill on this path is cooldown focused rather than momentum dependent. Here you'll embrace explosives, contraptions like the deployable turret, and buff you and your party by reducing skill cooldown timers and making ranged attacks multi-shot. Combat in Dragon Age: The Veilguard is buttery smooth, with attacks, abilities, and companions flashing around your screen in a blaze of particle effects. But underneath all that flash is some important substance. Early on in the game, you'll learn about the rock, paper, scissors system that teaches you the nuance of breaking through each type of enemy health bar. But if you miss those tooltips, it's very possible you'll spend more time than you might like dealing less than optimal damage. So let's make this simple for everyone. Red health bars are an enemy's exposed health pool. Your standard light attacks will do the most damage here. Blue health bars are barriers. Each class has a specific ranged attack that can pop these barriers with relative ease. It's important to note that the most effective way to do this is to hit the enemy's weak spot, which is often their head. Yellow health bars are armor. Heavy attacks for each class are the best way at cutting through the armor and exposing the red health bar below. The Rogue does have a bit of a unique heavy attack here, but the Warrior and the Mage have more standard offerings. Finally, there are orange health bars, which are blighted, and the best way to break through them is by using charged light or heavy attacks. This simply means holding down either the light or heavy attack button, which slightly changes the attack animation, while also dealing increased damage to blighted health bars. If you master the rock, paper, scissors system of combat in Veilguard, you'll be able to handle any encounter, even when the odds are stacked against you, which happens a lot. Once you reach the Lighthouse, the game's hub, you'll meet the Caretaker, a being of the Fade that acts as your guide, but also a monumentally important vendor that can help you upgrade and eventually enchant your gear. One thing that you might miss is that the Caretaker shop can be upgraded. However, to do this, you need the right amount of Caretaker points, which you accumulate by finding mementos. You'll find these all over the world, usually in areas off the beaten path, but you can also buy them from vendors in the starting areas of each zone. It's important to note that the points you accumulate are not actually spent to upgrade the caretaker shop, so don't think you need to hoard them. It's simply a threshold system. All you need to do is have more points than the threshold, and you can upgrade the caretaker shop without spending any additional resources. Doing this as soon as you pass the threshold gives you access to the next tier of upgrades, which essentially means a +1 on each piece of gear. We're not talking about the rarity here either. That's only upgraded when you find a duplicate item. The caretaker upgrades instead are an overlaid system and go from +1 to +10, with each level increasing all of the stats on an item. Now, as part of the main story quest, you'll also expand the caretaker shop to provide enchants. These are completely free and should be utilized on every piece of gear at every step in your adventure for you and your companions. As you upgrade the caretaker shop, you'll also have access to new enchants for each of your items, so be sure to scroll down, and while you can only have one enchant across your entire set of gear, opening up new options gives you way more flexibility in terms of what passive bonuses you can augment your gear with. Additionally, there is a hidden way to further upgrade and discount the caretaker shop, which we go over in our Wish I Knew Sooner video, so check that out after this video. When it comes to quests in Veilguard, understanding the different types and what paths they'll lead you down is important to progressing your game effectively. We strongly recommend doing every single quest you come across because once you get to the end of the game, that's it. There is no new game plus, there's no end game to make use of all that gear. The end is truly just the end. So if you don't make the most of your journey, you'll miss out on a significant portion of the narrative, action, and gear. With each main quest you progress, you'll unlock more of the world, and this matters because each of these areas can be revisited and explored in depth, allowing you to discover new side paths and hidden gear that was elusive during the main quest progression. As you progress the main story, you'll also encounter and recruit new companions, 7 in total. Each will provide you with unique abilities that you can call upon in combat, but they'll also have unique skills that allow you to manipulate environmental objects. At the end of the main story mission, more often than not, your character will also acquire a new piece of gear. On the other hand, you'll find side quests within each region of the world from various NPCs, message boards, or quest starters. Each will tell you a unique mini-story and take you to new areas that you might not typically explore or naturally wander into as part of the main story. During these quests, you'll often find loads of gear chests, which will help you level up your various pieces of gear, but the actual quest reward is typically experience, as well as some relationship points for your companions that accompany you on that quest. Finally, there are full-on companion quests, and these are some of the most engaging in the entire game. These require you to bring along a specific companion as you dive deeper into their backstory, trials, and tribulations. The great thing is, these provide you with opportunities to obtain some of the strongest companion gear in the game, while also giving you a chance to increase your bond with each companion, as all 7 have their own unique questline. With that in mind, every companion ties into the end of the game, and the stronger your bond is with them, the more impact they'll have on the final mission and resolution. At a few key moments throughout the journey, you'll be presented with a choice that will fundamentally impact the next leg of the game in some drastic way. Now, without spoiling too much, when you're given a choice to travel to Minrathous or Treviso, make sure you are progressed as far as you can be with the faction vendors of both the Shadow Dragons and the Antivan Crows, and thoroughly explore the offerings of the other local merchants in those areas. If that means completing all the quests up to this point and grinding out valuables for reputation and gold to be as caught up as you can possibly be, then do that. There is a pseudo catch-up mechanic that you unlock later in the journey, but it's costly, so best to take a step back before progressing the main story so you don't end up missing out on important loot. Once you're ready to push past the major Minrathous or Treviso decision, you'll be in the mid-game proper, and at this point, it's important to unlock all 7 of the companions in the game. Up until this point, you won't have them all, and until you do, there are a fair number of secrets that will be out of reach. By having all 7 companions, you'll be able to go back to each of the major areas in the game world and explore them fully. If you didn't know, each map has 2 major loot chests tied to secrets, which contain unique pieces of gear, but they almost always require that you have all of your companions so you can manipulate the environment in some way. Unlocking all of your companions also means you can rotate bringing them in for each mission, which allows you to build your bond with them more easily. This might not seem important at this stage of the game, but when you do get further along and realize how lopsided your relationships are, it'll mean having to backtrack, which just isn't efficient. We touched on this a bit earlier, but let's go through it with more detail. Faction Reputation. Throughout the game, you'll be drawn to interact with various factions, eventually granting you access or potentially restricting you from their specific faction vendor. These shops provide you with access to trinkets, weapons, armor, and more, and often have some of the most powerful and unique items to complement specific builds once you hit max rank. To level these up, you need to sell a ton of valuables that you accumulate throughout the journey, as these translate to gold and faction reputation based on their rarity. These exist all over the world, and while you can find some, you can also discover them by breaking boxes, barrels, and shelves, which are hiding valuables just out of sight. While this is useful information, there is another tidbit even more important here. Some of these vendors sell rare valuables that actually provide permanent stat buffs to your character once you purchase them. There are a surprising amount of vendors in each city outside of the faction vendor, and while not cheap, these upgrades will stack up quickly. By the time you hit up every shop, it's very possible that you've increased your damage or defenses by multiple percentage points. Until you reach level 20 in Veilguard, the game's combat doesn't really feel complete. Your goal should be to hit level 20 because that opens up specializations. Each class has access to 3 specializations that specifically push your build in a different direction, giving you access to a new ultimate ability and active ability. There's nothing special you need to do here to reach this point other than play the game, but if you're wondering when combat starts to feel more unique to your class, it's after level 20. To add to that, really pay attention to the build that you're creating, and don't be afraid to strip it all down and start over. There's no cost to do that. There are a lot of terms in Veilguard, and while the context menus are super helpful, my bet is your eyes will start to glaze over as you go between passive stat increases, trying to figure out what's best. What's most important is understanding that each active ability has a type, and if your passive nodes aren't directly improving those abilities, then it's pretty much a waste. Companions should also come in to fill the gaps. If you lack a primer, an ability modifier needed to set up an enemy for an explosive AoE, but you have 2 detonators, then look to your companions to do that work for you and equip their abilities that will fill in those voids. Companions will never do as much damage as you'd like them to do, but where they excel is providing that extra bit of utility to you as the player dealing a vast majority of the damage. Your companion abilities should work around your build and playstyle, and that's an important concept to grasp early because believe me when I tell you, you will be outnumbered 5-1 at various points in the game, and you'll need every advantage that you can get. A quick example, if you're playing the rogue spec as a Veil Ranger, you'll be playing primarily as a ranged player. Because of this, having allies that can taunt enemies and draw them away from you allows you to wreak havoc from a distance. Look for those types of interactions for each class because they exist and they'll help you maximize your gameplay. So there you have it, everything you need to know in order to have that perfect start in Dragon Age the Veilguard. As you play the game, if you discover other important tips, be sure to share them in the comments below so other players can reap the benefits. As always, if you appreciate the work that goes into creating this content, do me a solid, hit that thumbs up, and consider subscribing. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.